This is Noushi, and we're talking at this virtual tea party about knowing what is true about sin. Noushi, go for it.
Okay, so as I say that a lot. When I was growing up, I always thought that the three main monotheistic religions are very similar. That they all ask the same thing: to be good, believing in the same God, and then at the end we have a judgment day. And after I became Christian, and actually when I got involved in the ministry with Muslims, that's when I really started studying more and more. And I realized that it's just the opposite. When we look, before I thought we are mostly the same thing with the minor differences. And now I'm realizing we are literally not at all the same. We're very different. Christianity is very different than Islam, with superficial similarities. It's very interesting. One point that I want to address with any subject when it comes to Muslims versus Christians is that do not assume that Muslims know what you're studying about Islam. A lot of them are like how I was. And they just grow up in a Muslim background. And depending to their background, depending to their parents and the environment they grow up, they learn different specific truths about Islam. So mine was very modern because my parents were educated and, didn't believe a certain thing. So those things were not discussed. And when you study it in school, they just teach you how to pray and do different principles and don't go into the nitty gritty. So when it comes to the issue of sin, it is fundamentally different. In Quran, sin is not as repulsive to Allah as it is to the God that we believe in. And just when it comes to the creation, when you look at that whole situation, we look at it as Adam and Eve had a specific relationship with God. They were connected spiritually to God. And because they were sinless, their connection was very, very deep. So imagine the connection you have through the Holy Spirit and multiplied, I don't know by how many, because they were sinless. And once they went against God, that connection separated, and that's where the death occurred, the spiritual death occurred. And when we look at Christianity, we see that even before the creation of mankind, when God was planning to create man in his own image, to have a relationship with him, he knew that this is going to happen. And consequently, everybody who's born of Adam and Eve are going to be born separated and with sin nature. And he was coming with a redemptive plan to undo what was going to happen. And we all know about that, so I'm not going to go into it. So this whole notion of redeeming humanity was in God's mind from the beginning of creation. And we see in chapter 3, after they fall, the first prophecy about the Messiah, that he's going to come and destroy the evil one, and he's going to get hurt in the process. So we all know about that. I won't go into it. So how do Islam look at sin? Well, one of the things is that we believe that God cannot stand sin. And that's why he sent, he got separated from spiritually, they got separated. It was a consequences because God is holy, his standard is holy. So sin in by definition means not meeting the mark. And the mark is perfection. So we all have sin, and really doesn't matter big or small. As James says, one sin, no matter what kind of sin it is good enough to separate us from God. All right. And so we all know we have sin and fall short of God's glory. When it comes to Islam, Islam doesn't look at it that way. Islam teaches that each human being comes into this world sinless. And actually, they come into this world as a Muslim. But the situation in the world is such that they are going to sin. But also, another thing they teach is that it is up to Allah who is going to be sinning and who is not. In Surah 7, so he is the guide in that. In Surah 7, 178, we read, whom Allah does guide, he is on the right path. Whom he rejects from his guidance, such are the persons who perish. So in a way, he is looking at it as the Muslims see as Allah has a hand in the way they act. And when you talk to Muslim, you realize they most of them, if not all, believe in destiny. Like something happened, it's like, well, I was destined for this to happen. Well, you may think, are they thinking that way? Well, their belief teaches them that. And in Islam, sometimes the sin is the issue of the heart. But majority of the time, the sin is just your negative action. But in Christianity, it's totally opposite. In Christianity, is your heart attitude. We know that with the Sermon on the Mount. And the Bible believes that our negative behavior comes because where our heart is in regards to God and in regards to the world. We are tempted, we love the world. And so that's the source of sin. When it comes to Islam, God did not send them out of paradise just because of that. Because as far as a Muslim concerned, it was a mistake what they did. And they repented and God forgave them. God meant for them to leave the paradise and they have to win their way back into the paradise. You see the difference? And their way back is by doing good deeds, not doing bad things. But also, when we come to Islam, we realize that good deeds can negate bad deeds. So what do I mean by that? That means like if you read the Quran, that counts for something. So some of your other sins are forgiven. So like it's like a bargain chip. You have a very forgiving God, and certain action can undo some other actions that you have done that is bad. And that's why you see when Muslims become old, they start doing good deeds. They start giving their money away to charity and doing this and that because they want to purchase as many good deeds for the judgment day. So when they're judged at the end time, the good would overweight the bad. Whereas I don't even need to explain because of shortness of time what that means. Now, when it comes to sin in Islam, sin has different degrees. So idolatry clearly is a grave sin. Practices of sorcery is a grave sin. Unjust murder is a great sin. Loaning money with high interest is a great sin. But then there are a lot of sin that are not that important. And actually there is a passage that says sometimes God hides your sin, and if people don't know, is not counted as sin. It is so different. So consuming alcohol is sin, gambling is sin, adultery is sin, and false witnesses and lying is sin. Funny thing is, in the same area that they count that as sin, they find ways that is okay to do that. So what do I mean by that? Okay, consuming alcohol is wrong, but in heaven, in paradise, they can consume alcohol and it's okay. To have adultery, you cannot have more than 4 wives, and you can have concubines, you can have temporary marriages, but outside of that, you should not have, relationship with women, especially the wife of your neighbor. But in heaven, a man gets in paradise, they get 72 virgin, perpetual virgin that are going to be with them. They don't match. You should not lie. But then in Islam, it is okay to deceive and lie for the advancement of Allah's cause. And it's a name for that. And people find it totally okay. And Muhammad talks about it. Even if I swear at something and I made an oath, if I find it not beneficial, I would undo it and then give something to recompense for it. And then last not least is that, killing. Well, naturally you should not kill, but actually in Quran, it is promoted to kill for the cause of Islam. If an infidel is there, you're actually blessed and actually counts toward a good deed if you kill the infidel, if they don't accept your religion. So you see that all going on. And that's why when you talk to Muslims, like when I was talking to my dying aunt, and I was like trying to bring that we all have sinned, she said, I did not sin. Because what she was looking was at the big sins. I did not kill it. And she said it, I did not kill anybody. I did not do this. I did not do that. So realize who are you dealing with. But what I just wanted to bring, one thing that Jamie wanted me to bring, killing is bad in Christianity too. But Christians sometimes say, well, the Old Testament, God asked Jews to kill, like a whole group of people, their wives, their kids, their animals. And it is like a problem issue for a lot of Christians. So why is that? Well, there are some examples on that. But I want to get the biggest example, which would be with Noah. When God killed everybody, pretty much everybody died. All the animals died, all of the people, old and young, died, except one family and 2 of each animal, except a few extra ones for sacrifice. Okay? So you would say, this seems harsh. But when you get to the heart of it, you see it's a redemptive thing. The motivation from it, behind it is love. So what do I mean by that? God wanted, the biggest important thing in God's will is to bring the Redeemer, to bring the Messiah, and provide a path to salvation. Okay? How could he do that? By bringing a Messiah. The Messiah has to come for somewhat of a decent family. If it's a family is infested with sin, the Messiah cannot come from that. And when we read in Genesis, at the time of Noah, the world was so wicked that nobody was going toward God. It was just one measly Noah, one person who had some level of faith. And based on Hebrews, we know that the reason he was chosen was due to grace and due to his faith. It wasn't because he was just believing in God and he was willing to walk with God. And he sacrificed a lot because for 120, he was building a boat in a land that never seen rain. And it's dry. So he was doing something that was ridiculous in the sight of the people around him. And I'm sure he was ridiculed as he was giving them the message. So when we look at the heart of it, if we really study, when we see a bad thing, when God asks for the killing of a nation, when we get to the heart of it, you see that the motivation is ultimate love. We look at this life as all we know. He is looking at eternity and where we are going to be for eternity. And his goal is bring us to an understanding of who he is, so we can accept Jesus, bring Jesus once he brought it to bring us to himself, and then have eternity with us. And he knew that from eternity past, before he even created man. When we look at God and we look at him, we realize everything he does is motivated by love. Even his anger, even his judgment. So that is, this is a big subject and I had 10 minutes. So hopefully you forgive me. That's what I put in. It's in Jamie's hand now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Noushi.